The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello everyone, this is Faz Kareem with Learnit, and today's course is going to be on Power BI. This is the beginner course of the series. It's best to start here. Now if you don't know, Power BI is actually a free desktop app that you can download from the Microsoft Store. There also is something known as Power BI Service, which is an online tool that allows you to share your reports and dashboards in a workspace that you publish. That portion requires a subscription, but we won't be needing it in today's course. Today's course will be using the desktop app that you can download from the Microsoft Store. And as long as you have a Windows device, you'll be good to go. So be sure to be using the desktop app today while we cover today's course materials in Power BI Beginner. We're going to start out Lesson 1, Introducing Power BI. For those folks that are brand new to the business intelligence tool, we're going to start the course with an interface tour. It's very similar to our other Office products, our Microsoft 365 tools like Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. There's dozens of various data sources that you can choose to import. And we're going to go through how we can import data and run through the various examples and showcase what type of data sources you can connect to Power BI that are built in. We're going to be using the data that we import into the Power BI report to build visuals and ultimately build a report that we can share with others. In order to get that report published and in working order, there's going to be some work that we need to do. We might need to shape the data, make some transformations to the data, and even combine the data. For those of us that have been using Power Query, or more formally known as the Get and Transform group in Excel's Data tab, Power Query makes a return in Power BI. And we can use Power Query to do that transformation and that combining of our data. Ultimately, we're going to produce a report today using our data and the transformations that we've made. So some learning outcomes that you can expect from today is being able to import well-formed data into the Power BI desktop app, being able to build reports with stunning visuals, being able to create and edit query steps in Power Query, learn about the basic data transformation tools, and combine data from different data sources and tables. Let's get started.
Looking to support our channel and get a great deal? Become a member today to unlock ad-free videos. That's right, your favorite courses without a single ad. Interested in a specific video? Purchase one of our ad-free courses individually. Looking for even more? Gain access to exams, certificates, and exclusive content at LearnitAnytime.com. More information can be found in the video description below.
All right. I went ahead and launched Power BI Desktop. I've also saved the file. I've named mine Power BI Beginner. I highly recommend to save your work before starting with any importing or creating of the visuals. You want to make sure to have the file saved with the name and its designated location, just in case any issues happen with the device you're working on, or if the software crashes, you'll still have your work saved. Now let's begin with a quick little interface tour. Now, if we're familiar with other Microsoft 365 tools, we should be very comfortable picking up Power BI. because Power BI has also adopted the ribbon interface, which most of our Office products, our Microsoft 365 tools, already have. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out about the ribbon. The ribbon is organized in various tabs. Power BI doesn't have that many, as File, Home, Insert, Modeling, View, Optimize, and Help. And depending on if you have a shape or a text box selected, there might be some contextual tabs that pop up there. And then on the bottom of these tabs, you're going to notice that they have labels. These labels are known as command groups. They're just labels to help kind of organize the tools and groupings. So I like to use this to navigate the tool, mentioning that I'm in a specific tab, mentioning that I'm in a specific command group, before going and using that specific command, which is a tool that I'd use. It's nice to know that, just like Excel, the ribbon interface has a search box that you can use. This will help you getting started with Power BI, helping you find specific tools that you don't really know the location for, but know you've used before. So there isn't too much new with the ribbon interface. I want to talk about some Power BI specific areas though. Yeah. I'm going to clear this off my screen here. And I want to talk about our very first area in Power BI. On the left-hand side here, I see this little icon that's selected. It kind of looks like a graph or a visualization to me. That's called the report view. Now, the report view has a couple of panes that I want you to know about. On the bottom here, I can see that the report view is showing me that I have one page. Currently, that page is called page 1. It's not titled yet. The report view lets me add additional pages, kind of like how I would add worksheets in an Excel workbook. And I get to see the report view on a monitor or a mobile device view, because sometimes these reports are shared with apps and mobile devices. Now, if you look over here on the right-hand side, though, I'm going to open this up here. I'm going to open up the data one as well. This report view has a couple of details that we want to just notice, because we'll be using them today when we dabble in the report view. On the right here, I have access to something called the filters pane. When I add data, I'll be able to filter by specific data from here. I can filter on a specific page that I've created or on all pages in my report. And then I also have this area right over here. And it's known as the visualizations pane. This is where I can go and select the visuals that I want to add to my page. And if I want, I can format the visuals once I have them selected from here as well. I can drag and drop the specific fields that I want to use to create the visual. And then here on the right-hand side, the very far right, I have the Get Data, the data pane. So the Get Data pane is going to show me all the imported or created data sources that I have in the Power BI report, which right now it says I don't have any. So it looks like a lot's going on here in the report page view. Our report view is where our visualizations will go once we import the data. The visualizations or the viz, gets added to a page. And right over here, you have your 3 panes: filters, visualization, and data. I appreciate the fact that these can be expanded and collapsed because you don't always need to use them. I'll collapse them for now. Now, there's another area in Power BI that I want to discuss now. That was my report view. I also have something known as the table view. And when I go to that view, it's going to take me away from my page and my 3 panes. The table view will actually show me a preview of any data I have in the report. And the reason why this is entirely empty here, well, I don't have any data in my report yet. Once we do get our tables imported, you're going to notice that these data sets that you work with, they're going to have certain columns that relate to each other. You might have a list of products in one table and a list of sales in another. And the product IDs are located in the sales table. That way you can pull details from the products into the sales table. In order to establish relationships, Power BI has something known as the model view. When I go into the model view here, I'm switching from the table view to the model view. It's going to show me my tables that I've imported or created. And it's going to allow me to establish relationships between them. There might be a situation where I can connect my table using a date from one table to another date from another table, or an ID from one table, from ID to another table. We'll play with the model view once we import 2 data sources and need to establish relationships between them. So, Power BI is a pretty powerful tool. It's a pretty comfortable tool to start using because it has access to the ribbon, something we're already used to if we've used Microsoft 365 tools. I think the more important areas to understand is the report view and the details behind it. The table view. And of course, the model view. We're going to be working with all of these areas today in order to get our report created. Now, coming up next, I want to talk about using data sources. I want to actually get some data in this report. So if you haven't yet, I think it'd be best if you open up a Power BI report file and save it. And just tour the interface. Make sure you can access your report view, your table view, your model view. Make sure that you can open and expand your filters, visualizations, and your data pane. Make sure that you can access your pages and even toggle between the mobile view as well as the desktop view. In the next portion, we'll talk about getting data. which we can do from various areas like our Home tab, Get Data, or even on this icon here, Get Data, this hyperlink, or even directly on the page itself, since there's nothing on it. Coming up next, we'll talk about getting and importing data. Power BI allows us to import from various data sources, and they're constantly adding more. Now, if you want to see a list of those data sources that you can add from, the more commonly used data sources will be listed from the Home tab. Inside the Data command group, you can actually find the Get Data drop-down from there. And the common data sources will be listed on the very top there. If you don't see the data source you're looking for, these aren't the only ones available. You also have the option to go to more. From here, you can filter by category and even scroll through the entire full list that you can use to connect and import data from. Things like a SharePoint online list, Access database, Salesforce objects, Salesforce reports, a smart sheet, a SharePoint list, a Python script, Asana, which is currently in beta mode. So many various different data connections that you can use, and they're constantly adding more. Constantly. So, for today's session, I want to actually use a data source on the web. Import data from a web page. There is a data source on the fdic.gov site. The link will be in the description of this video. But it's actually going to show me the failed bank list. And this list includes banks which have failed since October 1st of 2000. And then down here below is the list itself, going across 48 different clicks. I have the opportunity to download the data as a CSV file. But I also want to make sure that this data is always up to date. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose to just copy the linked address. And this will allow me to just copy the address for the CSV file that I'll use as a web source for my Power BI report. So I'm going to use this web connection. I'll paste the URL. If the web page you're trying to connect to requires credentials, it would typically pop up here to have you input the credentials once you're trying to connect. And it looks like it was able to find the data source. It found the columns that I was looking for: bank name, city, state, certification, acquiring institution, closing date, and fund. Now, I have the opportunity to load this data and work with it as is. And I also have this opportunity to transform the data. And this will take me directly to Power Query, which I can do at a later time. I first want to show you how the data would look once it's imported into the report view. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to transform the data later. From the Home tab, I'll open up Power Query. So for right now, I'm going to get that web source, and I'm going to choose to load that in. Okay. When I've done this, I can see the report view. There's a new update to it. I can see the data pane has the bank list imported. If I expand this, I can see those columns that I've imported. Acquiring institution, bank name, certification, city, closing date, fund, and state. Oh, they're also in alphabetical order. Let's take a look at my table view. The table view is showing me a preview of my table that I've imported. The data pane is still available for me. If I go over to my model view, I can see that the bank list is in the model view available for me, but there's no other table to establish relationships to yet. What I want to start doing next is I want to transform the data. I want to transform the data using Power Query, because I'm realizing that with the data that I've imported, there are certain columns that I don't plan to use. There are certain columns that I need to create. And there are certain columns that I need to combine. And I'll be doing all that using the Power Query tool that's built into PowerBi. From the Home tab, transform data in the Queries command group. So I think what would be best now is if you can pause the video and see if you can get your bank list loaded into your PowerBi report. And go ahead and hit the save icon. All right. I've went ahead and loaded the data into my report. Now it's time to make some transformations to this data, because I'm realizing I don't need all of these columns. There's also some modifications that I need to make to some of the columns. So in order to go over and launch Power Query, PowerBi has a Home tab, and from there we have a command group called Queries. We can actually open up Transform Data. That will let us use the Power Query editor to connect, prepare, and transform data. Now, the Power Query window will open up, and it will take place of your PowerBi report. The PowerBi report is still behind the Power Query window. I want you all to know that. If we want to get back to the PowerBi report and continue working on the report view, we can hit Close and Apply. Goes right back to the report view. But I'm going to open up Power Query again. I wasn't done talking about it. So Power Query opens up, and if you've noticed, you get access to something very similar a ribbon. This ribbon also has tabs like Home, Transform, Add Column, View, Tools, and Help. On the left-hand side here, I can see the queries that I've imported. There's only one so far, called Bank List. I can see a preview of the data, and I can see the data type that's assigned to the column, as well as the column name. I also have this ability to filter the data from here before bringing it into my report. Now, on the right-hand side, I can see some query settings where it says properties and applied steps. Now, if you accidentally have closed this window and it's not available for you right now, I just want you to know that you can go to your View tab and you have the opportunity to turn on the query settings again. It just shows right back up. Now, the query settings has a properties drop-down, and from there you can rename the query itself. I'll call this one the failed bank list, since that's what it is. When I'm looking at this next window on the bottom, it says applied steps, and I see that there's 3 steps that are currently applied: source, promoted headers, and change type. There's a little gear icon near each one of these where I can see the actual script and the settings behind it. This is the step where it promoted the headers. I can see the top row became headers there. And this is the step where it detected the data types. These are automatic steps that the Power BI or Power Query window did for me. Everything that you do in Power Query is an applied step. So the next thing I want to do is I want to remove certain columns that I no longer need. I know this report came with a certification column. I don't plan to use that in my report, so to clean up my data, I want to remove it. I also want to get rid of the acquiring institution, since I won't be using that in my report. And I also want to get rid of the fund. So, the Power Query window allows me to go to my Home tab, and I have a command group called Manage Columns here. I can highlight a column, and I can choose to remove the column, and that simply applies a new step to the Applied Steps window. Now, if you want to undo that step, you just simply hit that little X there. Step goes away. Since I need to remove more than one column, I'm going to use the Choose Columns option from the Manage Columns command group. This will allow me to select the columns that I want to keep in one go. So I don't want certification. I don't want acquiring institution. And I don't want fund. I'm going to keep the bank name, the city, the state, and the closing dates. So that's my first transformation there. I think what would be best is if you pause the video and see if you can do that first transformation in Power Query with the data source that you've imported to your report. We'll do another transformation when you come right back. I'm hoping that process went smooth, but let's start talking about transformation number 2, now that we removed the columns. This time, I want to extract the year from the closing date. And Power Query has built-in transformation tools to help me do that. With the closing date column selected, I have the opportunity to right-click it. And my next step is going to be to duplicate the column. This duplicate column will be the year column. So that's going to add a new applied step. With this duplicated column, I have the ability to right-click, and I can use the built-in transformation. From here, I'm going to select to transform it to a year. And that adds another applied step. And finally, I'm going to go and up to the top where the header is located. Double-click in there and relabel it to year. I'll go ahead and leave the data type as is. This last transformation we did has 3 applied steps. We duplicated a column with a right click. We right clicked and we transformed and pulled out the year. Just so we understand what that means, we transformed, went to year, and pulled out the year. And then with the very top, we renamed the header row. I think it'd be best if you pause the video before we move on to transformation number 3. And practice doing transformation number 2 so that you have these 3 applied steps. Transformation number 3, I want to combine the city and the state. And this transformation has a built-in tool that allows me to do so. In fact, if I go over to the Transform tab here, the Add column there, I have the opportunity to use a command group called General from the Add column tab. Keep in mind, this is in my Power Query window. And one of the tools I have is columns from examples. The keyboard shortcut is Control-E. This allows me to give one example of the column that I want to create. So I'll do city, and then I'll do state. When I hit enter, I've just typed in 1, but it did every single other row for me. I can rename this to city, state, and hit OK. So I've done 3 transformations total here. I removed columns. This was done in my Home tab. After I moved the columns, I transformed the year. That was done with the right click on my closing date. And finally, I did a column from example to combine and merge 2 columns. And that was found in the Add Column tab. So I think it would be best to make sure that you're able to do all 3 of these action items before we close and apply this data back into the report. That's a little bit on using Power Query to shape, transform, and combine your data. Up next, we'll close and apply this data from the Home tab and go back into the Power BI report. From there, we'll start talking about how to build our beautiful reports and even choose to create additional tables with special DAX functions. So it's time to go ahead and close and apply this. And I can see all of the updates are now reflective on the report. I want to create a table of dates. This will help with filtering. I want to be able to get this failed bank list data and filter a specific date, a specific year, a specific quarter. And this data only has 568 dates. If I go over to the table view, this data has 568 rows. So it doesn't have every date of the year. It will only list the date if a bank has closed. That means I won't be able to filter by quarter, filter by year, because the date and time intelligence isn't there. It only has the dates the banks have closed. What I want to do next is I want to build a calendar table. The calendar table is going to span dates across the dates used in the model. So I'm thinking of maybe using a calendar from January 1st, 2000 to December 31st, 2024, since that will span across the entire dates of my data model. So, earlier we used getData to import data. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to go over to my table view, and I'm going to create a new table for my calendar. That way I'll have dates spanning across the full data model range. Now, in order for us to build the table, we're going to be using a set of functions, DAX functions, data analysis expressions. You can find a list of all 250 DAX functions on the Microsoft support pages. But the one DAX function I'm thinking of to get this job done is called Calendar Auto. This returns a table with a single column, named date, that contains a contiguous set of dates. The range of dates is calculated automatically based on the data in the model. That's the golden part there. The range of dates is calculated automatically based on the data in the model. So I'm going to use this function here to build my new table. I'm going to name this table Calendar. And I'm going to set the calendar table equal to Calendar Auto. I can select Tab to auto-complete the function name, and I can just close the parenthesis with nothing in it. And that will create my contiguous set of dates that span across the data model. Now that I have the date table created, I want to add a new column to it. So I have the calendar table selected, and that gives me access to the Table Tools tab, where I can add a new column to the table I've created. This new column, I'm going to go ahead and call month. And I'll set it equal to the month. And in the month function, I'm going to use the calendar date column. That'll grab the month for me. Very similar to our Excel syntax. I'm going to do that as well, but this time I'm going to do the month name. I'm going to use the format function. The format function is another DAX function, which allows me to use 3 M's for abbreviated months and 4 M's for a full spelled out month name. I can use the format function to give me a full spelled out month. It converts a value to a text according to the specific format. So I'll just give it the date as the value and format it with the 4 M's. So the calendar date inside the format function, comma, in quotes, 4 lowercase m's, close the parenthesis, and hit enter. I'm also going to grab a new column, again, this time for the year. Earlier, we used PowerCreate to create the year column in our table. This time, we're using DAX. I'll extract the calendar date. Close the parenthesis and hit enter. I could keep going. I can get quarter, day of the week in French, day of the week in Spanish, fiscal year quarter number. I can keep going and building a very robust calendar table. But this does the job that I need it to do. I have the ability to filter by dates, by months, and by years across my entire date range, not just the dates that a bank has closed. So if I go back to my report view, I will see I have a calendar table and the failed bank list. If I go to my table view, I will see I have a calendar table and a failed bank list. And if I go over to my model view, I will now see I have a calendar table and a failed bank list. Coming up next, we're going to talk about establishing table relationships so that Power BI knows that this column relates to these dates in this column. In order for us to let these two tables communicate with each other, we have to connect the closing date to the dates in our calendar table. Now, it does not matter from what end you grab, because it knows how to build the connection type automatically. But you do have to make sure to align the closing date to the date, or to align the date to the closing date, and not another column. It will match up the dates from my calendar to the closing dates of the failed banks, allowing me to filter with this data. This is letting me know that there's a single date, and there might be many occurrences of a date in the failed bank list, known as a one-to-many relationship. It's time to start building and producing our report, which we can do inside the report view. Before we get started with our first visual, I want to spend some time preparing our page. So, you're about to get started building your Power BI report. And a couple of useful tips that you might want to know about are found in the View tab of the Power BI desktop app. Something I prefer to use is grid lines. The grid lines will help me manually align my visualizations. So like, for example, if I go to my Insert tab and I insert a text box here, do you see how the grid lines show up? I really find that helpful for me. I'm going to delete this text box really quickly. The grid lines go away when there's nothing on the visual. Same thing if you pick a visual here, the grid lines show up. I'll delete the visual here. I also prefer to use Snap to Grid. When I do this, let me insert my text box again. The text box just feels a little bit more snappy when I move it around. It snaps to the dots on the grid, which I find useful for aligning my visualizations, objects and items across the page. Before actually adding your first visualization or your text box, I encourage you to determine whether or not you want to use grid lines or snap to grid. Pause the video and get a feel for how these things would show up and feel for you when you're moving objects around the page. Next, I want to talk about this visualizations pane. It might be collapsed for some of us, so make sure to expand it. Before we select any visuals, I think it's best to go over to the paper and the paintbrush. This allows me to format my report page. Let me update the page information. Instead of calling it page 1, I'll call it the failed banks report. I'll collapse the page information. Notice how the page name got updated down below. I also have the ability to update the canvas background with a specific color or an image. Folks, if you do use a color and you select a color, the transparency is set to 100%, so the color won't show up upon first selecting it. You have to change the transparency setting to see the color. Now, even if you're going to stick with the white background, I encourage you as you're building the report to pick a color. That way you can tell where your visualization lines up versus where the background is. Makes it a lot easier to align your visuals when it's a different color than the background. So I'll leave it a little bit gray there with maybe about 50% transparency. So small little updates before building and actually adding your first visual. In the View tab, I prefer to use the grid lines. I can see that's checkmarked on. I prefer to use Snap to Grid. And I also have made sure to update my page information. I'm going to go over back to my Insert tab now and finally add my text box. I'm just going to put it to the top of the report there. Now, when I build my report, I don't like having the report touch, or the objects of my report, I should say. I don't like them having touching the end of the page. It makes it hard to grab them and relocate them and move them around when you need to edit things. So I typically like having them kind of around the edges where I can still grab the edge here. I can still grab the edge here with blank space. I'll call this one the failed banks report. And of course we have formatting tools. Now, when I select a text box or a visual, it ends up updating the visualization pane with additional details. Like here, I can add a title to my text box. I can choose effects for my text box. I can change the transparency for the text box. I can add visual borders to the text box. Here, I'm going to round the corners a bit. But you have to make sure to have that selected in order to see the visualization pane update with these items. And then if you deselect it again, it goes back to the original visualization pane. And then here I can browse through my reports or the visualizations that I have access to when adding the report. So I think what's best before we add our first visualization to the report page, spend some time setting up your page. Use your page options, set up your page formatting, add in your text box and format it, and come back and we'll start talking about adding our first visual and working with some of this data here. Now, the first visualization that I want to pick here, I'm going to go ahead and pick the stacked column chart. And here I can design how the visualization will show up on the page. Since it's the one visualization, I'll just make it nice and large. Now, I always try to make sure to not let a visualization touch another piece or object because it'll make it harder to move them around in the future. So I kind of leave a little space in between all of them. Even if it's just one or two dots, notice how there's a dot of space in between it, making it easier to grab it in the future, making it easier to work with these tools in the future. Now, I want to see, let's take a look here. I have this option for the visualization to add something for the x-axis and the y-axis and the legend. I don't have to use all of these fields, but let's see if I can list maybe the bank names on my y-axis. Let's see how that looks. Okay, it's the count of bank names. 568 rows. There's 568 bank names. That makes sense. I'm going to add in, for my x-axis, the month names. Maybe I can see the bank names, the banks that failed month by month. I can break down this data. All right, that looks good. Notice how I was able to use the bank name from one table and the month name from a separate table because these two tables have relationships using the date columns. It knows that they can talk to each other. So it says that for the month of July here, 75 banks have closed. October, 63. April, 60. January, 51. 45. Oh, they're getting smaller. They're getting smaller, so it's sorted based off the count of bank names. I think it'd be better if I sort it or I should do it sorted by months instead, I think. January should be up there. Let's see if I can change the visualization sort order. In order to sort the axis that you've added, the X and Y axis, you have the option to select the ellipses on the visual. Right now, it's being sorted by the count of bank name. I'm going to check mark month name. I'm going to go back over to my ellipses here, and I also want to make sure to sort this in ascending order. And I'm coming to realize that the sort order is sorting it alphabetically. It's starting with the A's and then D's and then F's and then J's. It doesn't go in the month order where January, February, March show up first. So in order to fix this, I have to go back to my table view. I have to sort the month numbers with the month names. In the table view, I can access my calendar table that I created. And for this month name column, it's treating it as text. The format function formats things as text. I have the ability to sort this column by the month. That way January is 1, February is 2, March is 3. When I do that, and I go back over to my report view, it's going to do that reflective change, and now it knows to sort that text column using the number column. So before we add another visual to our report, I think it's best if you sort the axis by month name in ascending order. Once you realize that the sort is not showing up in month sorting, head over to your table view. The table view will allow you to select the month name and use your column tools. From there, you can sort by a new column. And I've sorted the month name. That's the column that's selected when I have this item open by the month. Your report should show up with the months in the correct order, and the count should remain the same for each month. It just sorted it differently for me now. Give this a go, and we'll start talking about some additional visuals that you can add to the report area there. Similar to what we did with our text box, we also want to make sure to format the visualizations we add. So if you do select a visualization, you're going to notice that the visualization panes updates. This no longer lets you format the page, but now it lets you format the visual that you have selected. Notice how the icon shows a graph instead of a page. So just be sure to have the correct visual selected when you want to go and format it. And I'm going to go over to the Format Your Visual option. From here, we have various formatting tools for the x-axis and the y-axis. I have the ability to change the label colors if I need to. I can see the month names for my x-axis have changed. Change the maximum and minimum height. I can also turn off the months if I needed to. I'll turn them back on there and increase the font size of these if I needed to as well. Yeah, make this bigger for us so that we can see the font size get bigger. I can choose whether or not I want a title for my x-axis or turn it off. There's different layouts, the minimum category width for the x-axis, and altogether I can always reset these items if I need to. Same with the y-axis. I can control the values and how they're formatted and increase the font sizes to them. I don't have a legend for this chart, but I have options to format the legend. I have the ability to use grid lines and the style of grid lines that I want. I can turn off the grid lines. Instead, maybe use data labels. I can make this chart a little bit bigger so it can show all the numbers on the outside end. There we go. Update the plot area background with an image if I need to. A lot of amazing updates that you can do with your visualizations. These are the visualization updates, and there's also general settings, like the properties, the size, the height, the position, whether or not you want a title. I'll call it Failed Banks by Month. And how you want that title formatted. I'll go ahead and center that. I can add a background color to the title portion. Make it nice and bold. So a lot of different options, even effects for the actual, here, I'll change it to be a little bit purple there. Too hard to read. I'll go back to white. I can make it transparent. Add a visual border as well. I'll round the corners to this as well, since I did for my failed banks report text box. So a lot of times you might miss these options because you can live your life not formatting your visuals, just using the default visual that shows up, but the visualizations all have these abilities to be formatted. Now, I want to be able to filter my report. So what I think what we should do is spend some time formatting this, pause the video, and I want to add in a new filter visual to filter the data in my report. So if I hover over these visuals, we have something known as a slicer. The slicer was invented in 2010 for tables in Excel and 2013 for pivot tables in Excel. When you select another visual, be sure to have everything deselected, because it's going to replace the current visual if you have it selected. Here, I have access to a new visual area, but this one only allows me to add values. I'm going to do month name as the values here. Oh, delete. Let me select the visual first. Month name. And here it gives me this little drop down where I can select the months and filter by them. But I'm going to format this slicer so that the slicer shows up not as a vertical list. I have the option to choose a drop down or a tile. Kind of like how that looks down there. Of course, I have different formatting options for the slicer as well. But now I can select the months, and it filters my report. If I hold down the Control key, it allows me to select multiple items. Try adding in a slicer for the month names. And then once the slicer is added, try formatting the slicer. That way you have tiles for the slicer, which works better for month names like this. If you are going to include a slicer, I highly recommend to go over to your Insert tab and take advantage of the Elements command group. There is a Clear All Slicers option there, and from there you can add a nice little button that you can use to clear your slicers. Looks like I need a little bit of space for this. Let me make this smaller here. I'll make this a little bit smaller here. I'll make this more narrow, moving this up a little bit higher. And of course, I'll move the Clear All Slicers down below. And I'll go ahead and format this as well. So if I select something and I want to clear it, I can just click on this option here, clear all slicers. So we have four, a text box visual. We have a stacked column chart. We have a slicer. And we even have a button, all on the single page. Pause the video and make sure you're able to add these items to the report page. All right, congratulations everyone. You've completed the Power BI beginner course. Stay tuned for Power BI intermediate. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the report publishing options, as well as some more visualizations like the matrix and table. In this lesson of introducing Power BI, we spent time navigating the interface, importing from data sources, using DAX to even create a table, ultimately learning how to build a report with best practices, played around with the transform data to shape, transform, and combine with the Power Query tool, helping us produce reports using the data we made transformations to. Stay tuned for Power BI Intermediate. We'll deep dive into some more advanced visuals, as well as talk about some more advanced DAX examples, before finally concluding the course with Power BI Advanced, where we talk about publishing and using the web service for the report and creating dashboards. Hi everybody. Welcome to Power BI Intermediate. This is Faz Kareem speaking, and I'm with Learnit. A friendly reminder that this is the second video in the series, and that I recommend to watch Power BI Beginner if you're new to Power BI before dabbling into the Power BI Intermediate session that we have today. I'm glad you could make it. I want you to know that all exercise files are in the description so that you can follow along in the video and create the report that we're working on in the video. In this lesson, we're going to be covering importing data and making transformations, things including merging columns, splitting columns, removing columns, and even creating a report with the data that we import. Let's get started. All right, I'm in the Power BI desktop app, and I think it's time to get the first data source loaded into Power BI, and I will use Power Query to make the transformations that I need to make. I'm going to head over to the Home tab of Power BI, and be sure to save your file before getting started. I'm going to be using the Get Data command from the Home tab, and I'll be using the text CSV file option for my import data. And I'll be using the invoice data.txt file. When this gets loaded into the Power BI desktop app, I'm going to choose to transform the data with Power Query. I can see the Power Query window has opened here. I can see that the applied steps have already been applied, the source, promoted header, and change type. What I want to do is I want to talk about merging columns. I have a year column, a month column, and a day column. I have the ability to go to the Transform tab, and I can put that together with merge columns. Now, if you need to select multiple columns at once, you can hold down the Control key to select additional columns. From there, with all three columns selected, I have the ability to go over to the Transform tab and choose Merge Columns. For the separator here, I can choose to add in my own custom separator. I'll choose the /, and I'll rename the column to date. The final step that I'm going to make is I'm going to transform the data type into a date. All of these changes have happened in the applied steps, the merge column, as well as the change data type. Up next, we're going to load the customer information. With Power Query already open, I can actually go to the Home tab and get my next data source loaded in. I'm going to load the customer information, which is stored inside of an Excel workbook, into Power Query. I have the customer data here, and I'm going to open this. I'm going to choose the first icon in the list, which is a table icon, to import the table. And when I hit OK here, I can see that a new query is going to be loaded into Power Query there. I have 2 there, and I'm currently selected with the master customer 1. I want to talk about another transformation we can do for the city province. I want to change this to put city and province in separate columns, and I can do that by splitting the columns. I can see that there's a space and an open parenthesis. I can select the column itself, and if I head over to the Transform tab, I have an option to split column from the text column command group. I'll do it by delimiter, and I'll do this here, and I'll set the delimiter as a space and an open parenthesis. And I'll hit OK. I can also go over to the city province column and give that a selection. And over here, I can do that from the Transform tab. I have the ability to replace the values. I'm going to replace values, the close parenthesis with nothing, and hit OK. I'll update this to city and province. Before closing and applying this data, I think it's best to remove unnecessary columns. I'm going to go to the Home tab and choose Columns. Under Manage Columns, to select the columns I want to keep. I no longer need the fax number or the phone number, website URL, or delivery method. I'm going to go over to the Home tab and hit Close and Apply. All right, I can see the data has successfully been loaded in here. If I head over to the table view, I can see the items or the columns I chose not to include are no longer in the import. If I head over to the model view, I can see that Power BI has automatically detected the data types. And I can see they made a connection between the customer ID and the customer code between the master customer and the invoice data. Customer codes and customer IDs. Now, Power BI does have a setting that automatically detects relationships. If I head over to the File tab under my Options and Settings, under the options here for data and load, under relationships here, I have auto detect new relationships after the data is loaded. Up next, we'll talk about building a report with the data we've made transformations to and imported into Power BI. Now, the reports are actually created inside the report view. I've actually currently set up my report view to have grid lines turned on once the visual list gets applied. I also have snap to grid turned on. And I'm also going to head over to my visualizations pane to format my report page. And I'm going to update the name to sales report. I'm also going to go over to the canvas background and update the color just a little bit, just so I can see it when I add the visuals, and I'll change the transparency so that the color appears. Creating visuals in Power BI can be pretty simple by just check marking the boxes. I'm going to select the sales from the invoice data, and I'll select the customer category name from the master customer. And I'll just go ahead and get this visual here. It looks like it's selected a column chart that's best fitting to describe the data. And I'll add it to my page here. I can also change the chart type if I'm not happy with it. I can go over to a different visualization and select the chart. Now, this chart is examining sales by all years. And just like Excel, we can add in slicers to the visualization. Make sure that you don't have an existing visual selected when you do that, though. I'm going to select the slicer icon here and add a slicer to my visual. And I can open up the dates here, which have a hierarchy in Power BI. And I can add the year field to it. I have multiple options I can go with. For the slicer here, I can format the visual that I have selected. And for the slicer settings, I have the ability to change the style of the slicer to maybe a drop down. I also have the option to change the slicer to maybe a tile. With the visual selected, I can format the visual as well. I can go over to the x-axis here. And over down here at the values, which I have turned on, I have the ability to turn off the title. I can also update the name. I'm going to go over to the general settings for the title, and I'll call it sales by category. All right, things are looking good. We'll talk about building a table of calculations next. For now, I want to get this visual and move it a little closer to the end side of the page, leaving room for my next one. Now up next, I want to start building a table of calculations. I want to show the sales by month, the year-over-year percentage change, and the sales year to date. And we'll do this by using Power BI's time intelligence capabilities without even needing to write a formula. So with just the page selected here, I'm going to add in the table visualization from the visualization library we have. And for the date hierarchy, I'm going to place a check mark near month. And I'm also going to place a check mark near the sales data in the invoice table. And I can actually go over to the Home tab here. And in the Calculations command group, I can create a quick measure. For the calculation that I want to select, it's going to be the year-over-year change. For the base value that I want to add, it's going to be the sum of sales. And for the date field, I'm just going to go ahead and add the date. And I'll add that to my table visual. All right. Now that we can see the formula here, I can see that the measure has been created, and I can actually add that over to my columns. I'll do another quick measure. I'm going to do the year-to-date total. And again, I'll do the sales as the base value. And I'll select the dates. And I'll add that in over to the invoice data. I can see the formula it used to create that. And if I need to, I can go ahead and show and display that column in my table. And without us realizing it here, what we've actually just done is we've used DAX, data analysis expressions. Quick measures are ready-to-made formulas that we just plug and play into our data sets. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here. And I also want to add in another visual. I'm going to deselect everything here. And I'm going to select the sales, but I'm also going to select the province here from the master customer table. And I'm going to change this over to the filled map. And I'm just going to make some of these previous visuals a little bit smaller. All right. Now I'm also going to display the quantity by month in a line chart. So I have the ability to select a line chart from my visualizations. And I'm going to select the month. And let's do quantity from the invoice data. And I'll just span that across the bottom here. I'm also going to move this slicer just a little bit lower. And I'm going to go over to my Insert tab and choose a text box here. And I'll add the text box across the top. And I'll call it the sales report. All right, things are looking good. I think I'm going to make a little bit room for one more visual here. Make things a little bit smaller with the map. Alrighty. And one more visual that we can talk about are the cards. I'm going to select the card visual. And for the card visual, I'll select the quantity as the field that goes in there. And now I can see the display of the quantity that's sold year by year or for a particular month that I have selected. All right, things are looking good here. We have the report being built out. I've added a text box, a slicer, a bar chart, a table, a filled map, a card, a timeline. What I want to do now is I want to actually get this report in the hands of the individuals that will need to use and access this report. In order to do that in Power BI, you have to publish the report. Now, publishing it is going to send this report over to Power BI service. It's going to send a copy of this report as well as the data set known as the semantic model over to the service. We can use this as an ability to share the report or even the data set to build existing reports. Under the Data Hub, you'll get access to your Power BI semantic models to create existing reports or future reports from existing data sets that you've worked with. Let me click Publish here. And when we publish to Power BI, we have the ability to publish to our own personal workspace. This comes included. If you're a pro user, you have the ability to create your own workspaces, which you can invite others to share your data with your team. I'm going to upload this over to my workspace and hit select. The report and the semantic model are being published. From here, I can open up the Power BI intermediate file on Power BI service. And I can see that the data is now online in Power BI service. Now that we're in the Power BI service, I would like to give a nice little tour of it. I'm going to head over to the home page here. The home page allows you to create new reports using Power BI Online, as well as viewing existing reports online that you've published. Now keep in mind, down here you have an option called Workspaces. And if you do have a pro license, or if you're using the trial, you have the ability to create your own workspaces that you can invite others to. Everyone that uses the workspace will need a pro account. And from here, you have the ability to invite others to the workspace, and everyone can upload their work freely here, as opposed to sharing things individually. Now, if you don't have the ability to create workspaces, you have the ability to use your own workspace, My Workspace. And although you can't invite others to this, you can still share the report or the file. Let's see if I can find the file itself here, the Power BI intermediate file there. I can also use the header row to figure out and get it closer, whether it's alphabetical order or the type of files that I want to filter by. But I called it Power BI Intermediate, and I can see that I have the file here. This is the report icon, and I also have the semantic model icon as well. When I click on this here for the semantic model, these are the two data sources that I put together and made my transformations to my invoice data and my master customer. I have the ability to refresh the data set. I can also set an automatic refresh cycle, where it can refresh up to 8 times a day. And if I head back over to my workspace, I have access to the file itself as well, where I can share using various methods. So if you don't have access to workspaces, that's totally okay. What we can do is use your own workspace, and now we're going to cover various ways that you can share a Power BI report. One way you can share with a free account, of course, is to export into a PDF. Although this disables the slicers and the Power BI functionality, if you do need to get the data across to others, you can definitely create an exported PDF file to share with others, even external or internal. It's just saying it might take a few minutes to create the file there. Hopefully this doesn't take too long for us. But once the file is created, we can go ahead and share that with others as well. This is a PDF of my Power BI file. Under the export options, I can also export it into a PowerPoint as an image or as live data. All right, and here it is in a PowerPoint. Let's take a look at how that PowerPoint might present itself to us. All right, looking good. I also have embed live data. Embedding live data here looks really cool. This is the live Power BI file there. So all of these options were found under Export. And then the last but not least, I have Analyze in Excel. Let's take a look at what Excel file it's going to present us with. Oh, it looks like it's creating a pivot table. And it looks like I get to work with the model itself to create the pivot table once the data gets loaded in. Very fancy for all my pivot table users there. Up next, we'll talk about the file options, because you can also download the file. And if your organization allows it, you can embed the report and publish it directly to the web. This allows you to share with the externals rather easily. However, there is a catch to where your data set becomes a public data set. Or if you want folks to view your data set or your report on a mobile device, you can generate a QR code from the File tab. And you can also adjust the permissions if it's already been shared directly from here. Now, when it comes time to sharing, you can do that from the Power BI service. And depending on your organization, they'll control the sharing levels that you have access to. Once you apply these settings and enter in an email address, you can copy the link or mail it or send it in Teams or even create a PowerPoint. And of course, if you decide to stop sharing it or remove any links, manage access is available to you. Manage permissions. See if you can publish a report. See what permissions you have, if you have the ability to publish publicly or share the file into the entire org or specific people. Check to see if you can create a workspace as well. All of this is done in the Power BI service once you've published your report. Alrighty, folks. In this lesson, we've imported data from two different sources, merged columns, split the columns, removed the columns, and ultimately created a report with various visualizations and ran through the publishing options. This was Power BI Intermediate, and we'll be covering some more DAX in the next lesson, Power BI Advanced. Hello and welcome. This is Faz Kareem speaking, and I'm with Learnit. Today we're going to be covering Power BI Advanced. Pretty nifty topic list for today's lesson plan. In today's course, we'll be covering how to use the Concatenate function in DAX. For those of us that aren't familiar, DAX is a language that we can use to model our data with Power BI. And it mimics using Excel functions. So if you're familiar with using Excel functions, don't feel too nervous or concerned. You pretty much know how to use DAX functions. They're just different sets of functions that you have available that help you manipulate the columns within your data. Concatenate is something available in Excel where it allows you to put two cells together. We can do this with our columns of data, maybe creating a first name and last name, or an address, or even an email address. The logical function, if, in Excel is a heavily used function. That's also available in DAX, and we'll run through some scenarios of us using it within our data set. We'll also play with the format function and learn about some of the strings you can use to format your text into the specific format you need. In our example, we'll be creating a month-year column. We'll dabble in using the related function. That way we can pull over related columns from tables that have relationships in our model. And we'll play around with helper functions like count rows, as well as using the switch statement to help make decisions, and even a little bit about X functions, before finally wrapping up and covering some measures in DAX. Lots ahead of us. Keep in mind the file will be available inside the description, and I encourage you to pause the video and follow along and practice programming or coding in DAX. The more comfortable you get with the typing of it, the better you'll get with DAX, and the more familiarity you'll get with the syntax of the language. Excited to be here, everybody. Let's have some fun with PowerBi Advanced. All right. I'm over here in our PowerBi Advanced DAX file. I just opened it up here for us. And the data is already loaded here. Keep in mind that if you do decide to go over to transform data, it will not be able to connect to the source since the source is not available. But this will do the job for us to practice DAX. We just won't be able to open the transform data on your side of things since the source is on my device. Now, this data set already has data imported in there, and there's quite a bit of it. I have the customer table, the date table, internet sales, products, product inventory, sales territory, and the temperature table. If I look over here at the table view, I can see that the customer table tracks all of our customer information. The date table is our calendar table. Quite a robust one. The internet sales here tracks the actual sales, and as you can see, all of our IDs and our key columns are tying into here. We have our product tables, which will give you the product key, which ties into our internet sales, which ultimately lists all the details about the products. We have product inventory. We have the sales territory keys, which tracks the regions, the countries, the groups. And we have the temperature table, which tracks the region, the month, the key, the average temperature, and the temperature range. We take a look at the model view. Lots going on here. Let's zoom out a bit. Let me close the properties panel and the data panel. As you can see, all of these tables have somewhat of a connection to the internet sales table using their key and ID columns. I have the sales territory T. This is quite a large table here. The sales territory key is tracking over to sales territory key in the internet sales. The customer key is tracking over to customer key in the internet sales. For the product table, which is also connected to my product inventory, has the product key to the internet sales, and I'm also using product key from product inventory. The date table, of course, is going to use the dates here to connect from the order dates. And the one table that we forgot to build a key connection to is the temperature table, which we'll get to today in our lesson. So, a pretty robust data model here with a lot going on. Now, what I want to do is I want to fix some issues with the data model using DAX. So, I think what's best to do is start focusing on the issues that we have. Let's look over here at our table view, and I want to point over here at the customer table. And in the customer table, where we track various columns of information, some hidden, some not, I have the first name column, the middle name column, and the last name column, along various other columns, but I'd like to create a full name column with this data. I'm going to take advantage of my table tools, and what I can do is I can use the option for a new column to create a full name column. If you are following along, I'm currently inside the table view, and I'm using the customer table that's currently selected. And I'm going to go over to the table tools. That way I can build a new column. So these prerequisite steps have to happen in order for us to actually use the DAX formula that we're going to discuss today. And when I do this, it's going to add a new column to the table I currently have selected. For this column, instead of calling it column, I'm going to rename it to something more descriptive, like full name is equal to. And I'm going to pull up the support pages for the DAX functions. This is a Microsoft support page here for a function we're about to use in DAX. The concatenate function joins two text strings into one text string. That's what it's saying it's going to do for us, but how do we do it? This article is going to help us figure that out. So it's saying that it has two parameters, text1 separated by a comma and text2. The definition of what text1 and text2 can be. The first text string to be joined into a single text string. The string can include text or numbers. You can also use column references. Okay, same thing for text2. The concatenate function joins two text strings into one text string. The join, it can be text, numbers, boolean, represented as text. Ooh, the concatenate function in DAX only accepts two arguments, where Excels can accept up to 255. If you need to concatenate multiple columns, you can create a series of calculations or use the concatenate operator to join all of them in a single expression or a simpler expression. If you want to use text strings directly rather than using column reference, you must enclose each string in a double quotation marks. Okay. Let's see how we can use this. Oh, they're putting together hello and world. Oh, they're putting together a customer last name and a customer first name. That's something maybe we might want to do. They've also added in a space here. All right. I'll minimize this for now. And for the full name column, I have the ability to use the concatenate function. And just like the page says, I can give it the customer. I'm going to do first name first. And as I'm typing, if I type in the column name or the table name, it pops up the columns that are available. And then from here, I can go over to the list and find the customer first name using my keyboard arrows. And once I see the first name, I can select Tab. Now, concatenate accepts 2 arguments, so after I give it the first name, I'm going to do another concatenate. But if I give it just the last name, look, I'm going to give it just the last name. That's not going to put a space in the full name. It's Larry Gill. All one word. So what I can do here, I'm going to go back and edit this, is instead of using the concatenate once, I can use it twice. I'm going to concatenate that to a blank space, comma, and then add the customer last name. And when I hit enter here, it performs the same operation, but this time the space is included. Now the support page did mention that I can use the ampersand. So, the operator. If you need to concatenate multiple columns, you can create a series of calculations or use the concatenated operator. Let's see how I can maybe use the operator. I think that would look much more simpler. I'm going to clear this off for now. And I could have also just used the customer name. Tab. That's the customer first name. And spaces don't matter. It ignores white space. In the middle there, I put in quotes a space. And that's the operator. Customer last name. It does the same thing for me. I'm just using the operator for concatenate. Go ahead and practice your concatenation skills in DAX. We'll be covering the if function in DAX coming up next. So I am currently inside of our DAX file, and I'm in the table view. That's what I'm looking at, and I'm currently looking at the customer table. We just finished off creating a full name column using concatenate in our previous lesson. I want to go over to the ages here where we're tracking the customer ages. And what I really want to do is I want to break down these ages into these different categories of buckets. 55 and plus, 45 to 54 age group, 35 to 44, and then 18 to 34. I'm going to use the if function in DAX to perform that. The if function in DAX also has a support page, and I find this rather useful to have open while you're using DAX. That way you can read a little bit about these functions and the use cases behind them as you're working on them. So the DAX if function has a parameter for the logical test, separated by a comma, a parameter, if it's true, separated by a comma, and then a parameter if it's false. I believe this is a typo. This little comma here should be before that bracket, but looks like they've missed it there in their support pages. This last argument, the brackets, means it's optional. I'm pretty sure this comma was meant to be before there. Funny to be a mistake on a support page for Microsoft, but we found one. So, the if function can return variant data types if value of true and value of false are different data types. But the function attempts to return a single data type if both value of true and value of false are numeric data types. And we have some examples here too. If the products and the list price is greater than 500, mark it low. Here's a private price group. If the products and list price is less than 500, mark it low. If not, mark it high. And then here's a nesting of an if. where if the product in the list group is less than 500, mark it low. If the products in the list group is less than 1500, mark it medium. If not, mark it high. When you need to nest multiple if functions, the switch function might be a better option. The function provides a more elegant way to write the expression that returns more than two possible values. We'll be covering that as well today. So, with the customer table, in the table view, I'm going to build my second new column. I'll call it age breakdown. And I'm going to make this a multi-line one. So I'm going to open up the formula bar here. They have bottomless mimosas, but let's stay off of them for right now. And if I hit Shift Enter, it goes down to a new line in the formula bar. I can also do 2 forward slashes to make a comment. So I'll write that out as a comment. Shift Enter. The comments show up in green. The forward slashes make it a comment. Shift Enter. Be sure to hold down Shift when you hit Enter. And I'm going to do my first if function for the customer age column. That's what we were looking for. Tab. I'm going to check if it's greater than or equal to 55. And if it is, I'm going to mark that value as 55 plus. That's the true value. Result if true, comma. And on a new line, I'm going to do my next if. That's the second if. For the logical test, I'll do the customer age. Again. I'll make it greater than or equal to 45, comma. And if they're in that group, I'll put 45 to 54. And I won't forget the quotes there. I'll use the third if, and I'll do the customer age. Yet again, I'll pass it through the third time. Set it greater than or equal to 35, comma. And if that's the case, I'll do 35 to 44. And if that all is false, I'm going to set over the age group to 18 to 34. I'm going to close out my first if, or my last, I should say. The middle if, with that parenthesis. And then the third if. Notice how they're highlighting all to make sure you've covered them. DAX uses the first pass rule, and this eliminates data at the end of each pass, ultimately reducing the column's rows, labeling each one with the customer age breakdown that we've assigned. Go ahead and practice this. I'm going to go ahead and input this formula and commit. And I will see it show up inside of my customer table when I collapse the formula bar. Should be all the way at the end here. 45 to 54. And yes, you can move them around if you need to. Oh, I may stand corrected there. That's right. That's Power Query. Although you don't really need to maneuver around your data too much in Power BI. So, the age breakdown seems to be created. That's it for the customer table for now. Go ahead and practice the age breakdown before we sweat over to our date table and talk about the format function. All right. We just finished off the age breakdown and full name using the customer table inside of the table view. I'm going to go over from the table view and head over to the date table here. What I want to do with the date table is I want to create a month-year column that would look something like this for February 2nd, 2024. There's actually a format function in DAX that we can use to perform this. You just give it the value, which in our case will be the date column. And then here is the format string that's required. A string with the formatting template. Formatting template. Examples. Oh, you can mark it with the general number, currency, fixed, standard, percentage, scientific. And it's showing you how it's going to display those results. But what if I wanted to do a specific month, year? There's a lot of different templates that I can pick from, as you can see. Okay. The D's display the days. The W's display the weeks. The M's display the abbreviated months. 2 M's is the number. What about year? Oh, 4-digit year is 4 Y's. So it's MM-YYYY. Okay, Y. Not bad. Let me build a new column in my date table. It has to be in the date table, otherwise you won't be able to create this column because you won't have the correct fields. I'm going to call this one month hyphen year is equal to, and I'm going to make the formula bar bigger. Shift enter, and the format that we want, I'm just going to comment that there, is MMYYY. I can use the format function. I can pass it the date table with the date column. And for the string, it's just going to be 2 lowercase m's hyphen YYYY. And when I close out that parenthesis, I can enter in, and I can see the newly created column in my date table there, the month, year column, all the way at the end. Of course, there's different formats that we could have selected depending on the string template that we've chosen. Keep in mind that this information is public information, and there's about a set of 250 functions. And if you ever have a hard time finding things on these pages, keep in mind you can always search through the documentation for the specific function that you're looking for, or some key phrases or keywords about the article that you're looking for. Really powerful stuff here. Go ahead and give the format function a try. What I want to do next is deal with our temperature table and how we're going to fix the issue where there's no key column connecting it to the internet sales. Before going into this next function, I want to give a little bit of background about why we're going into it. Well, I want to head over to my data view, my model view. And as you can see here in my model, we discussed in the very beginning of our lesson how almost every table has some way of talking to the internet sales table. My product key connects internet sales to product table. My customer table uses customer key. My sales territory table uses sales territory key. The date table uses the dates and the order dates. This one's been left off. The temperature table. I see they have a key column. Let's see what that key column is. If I go back over to the table view, and I want to take a look at the temperature table, I can see that the key column is a combination of a region and a month number. Those two fields put together make a unique combo key. Northeast 1, and we have the temperature range and the average temperature. Northeast 2, which means northeast in February. We have a temperature range and the temperature. If I go back over to the model view here, I have the ability to create that column. The key column that I need inside the internet sales. So that way I can connect the two. So the sales territory here has a region. They have the regions listed. If I go to the date table, I have the month number of year, which is already connected to internet sales. So the ability to create the key is just a combination of region concatenated with month number of year. And those two together will make the key. So if I put these two together and create a new key column called temperature key, I can actually connect these two tables together and get all this information about the temperatures in the internet sales. So notice how the sales territory has a connection to internet sales. The date table has a connection to internet sales. In order to use this function called related, you must have a relationship to the table you want to pull from. So I want to add in a column into internet sales from sales territory as well as date. Returns a related value from another table. Both of these functions, or both of these columns, are related to the internet sales. Therefore, I can use the related function. So the related function requires that a relationship exists between the current table and the table with the related information. I want the information from here. I want information from here and here. They already have relationships. I'm good to go. I'm going to go over to the table view. And inside of my internet sales, you got to be sure to click on internet sales when you're doing this. I'm going to create my new column using the related functions twice with concatenate. I'll call it temp key or temperature key is equal to, and I'll use the related function, and I'll pull over the sales territory region. We just did this in a previous lesson, the concatenate, and I'll use the related function. I'll pull over the date field or date column with the month number of year. That's the 1 through 12 digits, and if I close the parenthesis, I can go ahead and hit enter. Oh, what did I miss here? I already found it. I'm going to leave this here just so we can see how simple it is to notice a mistake. Functions related expected a fully qualified column reference as its argument. And it's only expecting one column here, but I put the function twice. I missed the parentheses, what I did. Yeah, related. Let's make sure that shows up correctly. Let's see it. And there we go. So I put together the temperature key, which now gives me the ability to go over to my model view, and I can get the temperature key and connect it to the key column in the temperature table, establishing that relationship finally. Pretty cool stuff there. Pretty cool stuff, and now the tables are connected. So the function's simple, related, but the reason why we're using it and why we're creating it is pretty important. I want to focus on the table view and head over to the sales territory table. The sales territory key We have the sales territory region, country, group, and the image that would be available. I want to figure out how many total transactions I have in the internet table. Then I can figure this out to determine whether I have high volume, medium volume, or low volume regions. There's going to be two parts to this. I first want to count the rows in the internet sales and see from what sales or what regions these sales are coming from. Next, I'll use the switch statement to assign the high volume, medium volume, low volume, or NA region volumes. Let's do our first helper function inside the sales territory. I'm going to add my new column called total transactions. I'm going to use the count rows function. It counts the numbers of rows in a table. So you need to give it a whole table as the argument. There's another function I want to introduce now. The related tables function. The related table function evaluates a table expression in the context by the given filters. The name of an existing table using standard DAX. It returns a table. So if I want to count the rows, I'm going to return the table. And I'm going to count the rows inside of the internet sales. And that's going to break it down in the row context that we have for each region. Pause the video and make sure you can add your total transactions to sales territory before we go and add in our region volume to sales territory. So I'm over here in the table view, and I'm over in the sales territory table, and I'm going to add in my second new column called region volume. I'm going to use a switch statement. Returns different results depending on the value of an expression. And I'm going to set that switch statement to true, so it's always going to run. The expression is true. And in the switch statement, I'm going to hit Shift Enter and pass the sales territory, total transactions, column I just created. And I'm going to check if it's greater than or equal to 7,000. And if it is, I'm going to mark it with high volume. Shift Enter. I'm going to pass sales territory yet again with the total transactions. But I'm going to compare it with greater than or equal to 4,000, comma, and I'm going to mark this one as my medium volume. And the final one, the sales territory, total transactions. If it's greater than or equal to 1, I'll mark it with low volume. And I'll hit comma, and if all of those, the else case will be NA. And I can close the parenthesis, and that's a much more elegant way to do an if function that switches between multiple decisions there. I'm going to go ahead and commit this in. And now we have our region volume data inside of the sales territory table. Go ahead and give that a go. All right. I want to go over to my customer table. And I want to figure out the records for each customer in the orders that we have. And I want to then figure out the last order for each customer. And I want to add this to my customer table. I want to do the last purchase date, essentially. That's some good info. I'm going to add a new column to my customer table. And I'm going to call it last purchase date. Maybe we can do an extra marketing campaign for these folks, depending if they haven't purchased something within the month or the year or the quarter. So I'm going to use a function called max with 2 x's. Returns the largest numeric value or the largest string that results from value in an expression from each row of a table. So this is going to return the last purchase date from a table. But I have to give it a table. The table that I want is not this table. It's going to be the internet sales table. So that's going to get the internet sales table. And what I want from the internet sales table is the order date. So I'm going to get the internet sales order date. And when I close this parenthesis here, what I have is the max part will return a single column. And then the x part of the max, the second x, takes the table, works on it 1 row at a time, performs an expression on each and every row of the table, and the results, the single column of that table ends up getting returned. This ultimately will get me the last purchase price for each customer, or purchase date for each customer here. Of course, I can adjust this data type from date and time, if I need to just date. Coming up next, we'll play around with some DAX measures that we'll add in. I want to start talking about creating measures. Now, typically, I like to build my measures in the report view so I can quickly test the measure. And ideally, I want to go over to my data view and store all of my measures in a folder. Measures are calculations that aggregate data from one or more columns of tables in the data model. I'm going to go over to my Home tab and build my first measure. I'm going to build a measure that calculates the total sales using the sales amount. When I click on New Measure here from the Home tab, I have a new formula bar pop up in the report view. I'm going to name my measure Total Sales. Now the measure gets created inside of the table that you currently are in when you hit New Measure, but we can always move it after. I'm going to use the sum function here, and I'm going to use the internet sales table, and I'm going to find the sales amount in the sum function. Enter. Notice how it's inside the customer table here, because that's where I was when I selected it, but I can always go over to the measure tools with the measure selected and switch it over to a different table. I'll move it over to internet sales. I'll also mark the category or the format as currency. And then I will also like to ideally move it into a folder. So if I go over to my model view and I select total sales, I can type a folder name to store my measures into from the properties panel. I'll call it AAA or AA or AAA, my measures. And I'll store all of my measures in this folder by adding this name, AAA _ my measures. As you can see, there's a folder now in internet sales where my measures will be stored. So I like to do this as I build my measures. I have 4 more to put together. I'm going to go back over to my report view and head over to my home tab. And of course, if I'd like to, I can actually use these measures. Alrighty, let me delete this little visual here, and let me add in a table visual. And I just want to add in the measure that I created so I can test it there. Okay. About 29,000 total sales. Or 29 million, I apologize there. That's a lot of sales there. Let's build another measure. This time I'll do total cost. I'll call it total cost. And I'm going to set it equal to the sum of the internet sales. But I should have total product cost in here. If I close the parenthesis here and hit enter, the total cost showed up with the customer table, but I'm going to move that over to internet sales table where my folder is. I'm going to set the data, the format, to currency. I'm going to go over to my data view, my model view. And if I select the total cost here, I can type in AAA inside the display folder names, underscore my measures. And that moves it over to the appropriate folder I created for my measures. If I go back to my report view, I can see the total cost alongside the total sales there as well. Let's see total transactions here. I'll build a new measure for total transactions. Total transactions is equal to, I'll do the count rows function. We just did this one in our DAX, but we did it inside of a row context. And I'll pull over the internet sales. And I'll move this over to the internet sales table. And I'll also change this over to whole number seems fine since it's going to be a number, count rows. But I'm going to make sure to go to my data view and I'm going to select total transactions and type in the folder name I want it to be located in. Excellent. And of course, I can test them in my report view. Let's see the profit we've made. If I go to the Home tab, I can select New Measure. I'll call it Profit is equal to total sales. That's one measure. Minus total cost. That's another measure. I can use measures within measures. If I go back over, I can mark this into the internet sales. And I'm going to mark this as currency. And I can go over to my model view. Under profit, I can add the folder name that I want it located in. If I go back over to the report view, I'm going to do our profit margins as well. I'll set it equal to the divide function. And I'll divide the profit with the total sales. Once I create the measure, I can move it to the appropriate table. I can set the appropriate data type. And I can go over to my model view And for the profit margin, I can move it over to the appropriate folder by adding in the display folder name. It's very important to do this as you're building the measures so that you don't have like 5 or 6 measures floating around in different tables, having a hard time finding them. Now I can easily select the measures from one area and display them in my table there. If I need to, I can also break down this table's information using a slicer. The slicer I can use for the age breakdowns for the customer table. And now I can break down the total sales, total cost, total transactions, profit, and margin using the age breakdown. Noticing the profit margin is 0 because the decimal places aren't visible, but we can easily show those decimals. I'll show 2 decimal places there. All right. Go ahead and add a slicer as well as your 5 measures into a table and see the breakdowns. All right, our next objective is I want to create a measure, but this measure is going to be a little different. I want to create a measure for all sales, regardless of the country. Even if filters apply, I want to show total sales for all the countries. And I want to use a function that reminds me of almost building a pivot table. A get pivot data, or a pivot table. In DAX, there's a function known as calculate. And it's a very powerful function. The calculate function in DAX. Evaluates an expression in a modified filtered context, which sometimes is important. So, let's see us do a calculate function measure that will see the total sales for all countries. For all countries. If I build a new measure here from the Home tab, New Measure, I can call this measure total sales, and I'll put in parentheses all countries. And I'll set that equal to the calculate function. And I'll pass the total sales measure as the expression. But I want to, for the filter, include all of the sales territory country. I'll close out my parentheses here. Alrighty, I have my measure. Let me go over and move that over to the internet sales. And I'll go over to my model view. Total sales all country, and I'll display it into the appropriate folder. All right. Now if I go over to my report view, I can see I have the total sales here. I'm going to add that over to my table. Total sales, all country. 1 second. Did I miss the data type there? I did. Let's mark that as currency. Cool. All right. Now I have a total sales, all countries. I I see it filters with the age breakdown. Let me add in a slicer here. Let me go over to my sales territory. And I'll add that over to the slicer. Now look at this. Look at what the calculate function's doing for me. Even though I'm filtering this one's for all countries. It's not going into the filter context. Okay, what if I want one for total sales for just United States in the table without having to filter for it? I want one for total sales of the United States. I can use the calculate function again. I'll call it total sales USA. And I'll set that equal to the calculate function. And I'll pull the sales territory yet again. Oh, apologies there. That's coming next. The total sales. And then for the expression here, for the sales territory, I actually want to set the sales territory country equal to, and in our data set, we have it fully spelled out to United States. And I can close out this parenthesis here. And when I hit enter, of course, I'm going to move this over to the internet sales. I'll change this to currency format. And if I go back over to my model view, I can enter the folder name in. And I can display that inside the table. So look, this should match if I filter to United States now. And it looking like it did. Minus the decimal places that I have set to auto for my measure. I can do the same thing for Canada using this measure. I can just copy and paste the formula at this point and add in a new measure. This time, just replace all the details for USA with Canada. And of course, it's in the internet sales already. I'll mark it as currency format. And just for good practice, I'll move it over to the appropriate table. And in the report view, I can display this Canada inside the table. And this total sales, if I filter for Canada, should match the total sales across, and it looks like it does. Okay, what if I wanted to do both USA and Canada combined? I'm going to add in a new measure here, home new measure. I'll call it total sales, USA and Canada is equal to the calculate function. We're going to use the total sales again. But this time, for the sales territories, the country, I'm going to set it in curly bracket, United States, Canada. Oh, it's saying I forgot my quotes there, which I did. All right. And I'll close out my curly brace, then close out the parenthesis. All right, and I'll go ahead and make sure that this lives in the internet sales as a currency format. And I'll go over to my model view. AAA, my measures. And I'll go back to my report view and display this information in the table. And I'll hold down the control key and do Canada and the United States together. And I can see that this two filters match. 8 million, 8 million. It'd be nice to make this a little bit bigger for us just so we can see the numbers better. All right. Looking good. That's a little bit about Calculate, the Calculate function and how powerful it can be. I can do the total sales for a specific year. If I just replace the expression part with sales territory with dates. Really cool, powerful things there. Give it a try. I've just done multiple examples. We started out with all countries. You can pause the video and see the formula. Next, we did the USA. And then we did USA and Canada. Or apologies, we did Canada. And then we did USA and Canada. All right. Some Calculate in DAX. That's going to conclude our Power BI Advanced lesson. We've covered quite a few examples of some more advanced scenarios that you might run through in Power BI report building, such as the concatenate function, using the if function, using the format function, the related function, count rows with the related table added in, switch statements instead of the if, and the X functions, as well as working with measures, including the calculate function in DAX.